welcome here this morning. You may not all be aware of this, but this is a first for SSU. This is the first time we're doing presentations of senior research projects, and we're delighted to have a nice full room for this, including some parents, and just great to have you here to support our graduates in sharing all that they've learned and expressing some of that to you. A senior research project is a chance to do something in a senior year which is more flexible than a thesis. It allows students to do something that can have, it may or may not have kind of less of an academic focus and more of a chance to engage in some practical real life ideas. And so another first in our first two presenters this morning is that they're kind of partnering in the way that they planned their senior research projects. So it's been a delight for Steph and Emily to see how they wanted to inspire, to dream, to think of a way to take some of the good that they felt like they experienced in a place like SSU and think, how can that be a part of my work in the world? And how can it be a part of the kind of compassion that I feel for helping people who may be in a difficult predicament, so particularly teen girls. And so they've dreamed up a home, new hope, I think is what they're wanting to call it. And so they're working sort of in tandem, but with separate projects. So Steph is working on kind of a therapeutic approach. That would be a great way to work within a home of that type. And Emily was focused on how to have a kind of a communal core to that kind of project. And Emily interviewed some homes that did that kind of a communal approach or something like it in their approach. So some firsthand feedback from some of those homes that you'll hear about in Emily's presentation coming up after Steph's. So again, delighted to have a full room to hear this. The presentations should be somewhere in the nature of 10 minutes, so you don't have to sort of settle into your kind of long listening that you might want to save for tomorrow when you hear thesis presentations. But you will still want to be ready to have some follow-up questions. So there will be about 10 minutes to listen to them and then a chance to help them unpack what they haven't unpacked yet during that 10 minutes. So please feel free to ask them a question when we're done. So Steph, come on up. Oh, actually, before you do, let me just say a prayer. I think both Steph and Emily would appreciate that this morning. So, God, thanks for being with us. Thanks for being here in the middle of a week that is very full of all kinds of things, full of emotions, full of achievements, full of celebrating, full of worrying about final deadlines and last minute things to hand in, full of social events and intersections of families and friends, travel, so much that all comes together during a week like this. And God, we invite you to be right at the center of all of that. We invite you to be here to calm the nerves of the speakers, to help them to say really what's at the heart of this for them, what they learn, what inspires, and pray for receptive ears for everyone that's here. So thanks. Bless Steph, bless Emily this morning. Be with us. Amen.
Hey guys. So we combined did our presentation on a prospective plan to start a summer residential home for young girls in high school. And when we started thinking about it, I wanted to, I thought about my own personal experience, which is one of the inspirations that came from it, and Emily's experiences. And as many of you know, I've suffered from depression myself. And in counseling class last year or the year before, I learned about narrative therapy. And just learning about narrative therapy had helped me in my process. And I thought, this is a really good type therapeutic approach to help those with depression. So I wanted to explore that. So I explored using narrative therapy, narrative group therapy, and psychoeducational group therapy in the home setting. And so I'm going to give you a brief introduction to narrative therapy, and then I'll talk about why I think it's good and how it'll be used. So narrative therapy was developed by Michael White and David Epstein, and it was mainly developed, backtrack. I'm going to talk about teen depression first. So depression is on the rise in today's society, but especially in young girls. And there's connections through my paper with this. Young girls have a lot of social pressures from social structures, such as looking a certain way. And Foucault discusses the normalizing gaze, and this gaze, it's the ever-present gaze that is upon us, as a whole, as everybody, but especially on females, because as females, we are expected to look a certain way, act a certain way, be polite, and we have all of these social pressures that are built into the culture that we're a part of, and so we're we build our identities based off of these social constructs. Sorry. And so narrative therapy is a type of therapy. It's person-focused. It's not so you go to a therapist and you can get on medication, and medication will help you. It will help calm the physical symptoms and stuff. But oftentimes it doesn't get rid of the feelings of hopelessness and the thoughts of self-hatred. Those things still exist. They might be minor and in comparison to what they were. But narrative therapy is more focused on looking at the person and how the person can better help themselves and separate themselves from the problem. So in the case of depression, the person isn't depressed. The person is a person, and depression is the problem. So by separating depression from the person, you're making it separate from themselves, which makes it easier to talk about the depression without being scared of offending the person. And so it's all about looking at the person and how they can cope with it. So Foucault mentions truths. It's what we would normally refer to as norms, but it's these social, or these truths that we're made to believe about ourselves. But the thing is, Foucault believes these are developed by social constructs and institutions that they aren't necessarily real. So we live by these norms because we think that that's how we need to live, which makes us it sets us up to, especially young girls, to lose their identity because we're building on these social norms because we have to be this certain way. And one study that I looked at women since the women's movement and the pressures that we face, and it's women feel the need to take every opportunity that's given to them, especially after the women's movement, because now we're expected to step into that and be oh, all these doors are open. We need to get to the best school. We need to get the best grades. We need to be the best at sports. We need to look the best, be the best girlfriend. And all of these pressures make us feel we don't have a sense of identity because we need to fill all of these truths that society tells us about ourselves. So, and Foucault, narrative therapy is really based on that. And Foucault's philosophies are really based on breaking away from that and being trying to find yourself through that. Michael White and Epstein trace, I'm just going to read a bit. They trace Foucault's beliefs to Jeremy Bentham's panopticon, which refers to a circular prison with a guard tower in the middle. The prisoners would never know when or who was watching them from the tower. They would only know that they could be seen at all times. This produces a fear of always being seen by dominating powers. The fear that someone is always watching gives the guards power and control over the prisoners. Foucault relates this type of control to modern society. They believe that the new social control of normalizing judgments has been pushed on the people, and he also believes women are the ones most affected by this form of social control. They state that it can be argued that in the relationships between the sexes, this model is gender biased, with men more often the instruments of the normalizing gaze and women more often its subject. Which is just like, that's one of the connections of being like women are off, like, even in today's society where women are stepping forth and being like, we are stepping forth and like there is more equality and stuff, but it still exists, like that underlying thing still exists, and the fact that we have this pressure to be the best because we're trying to be equal, like makes that even more so, because like we could be walking down the street and like the new, Foucault says that the new social control is the ever-present gaze of like, there's always somebody watching, and we always have this feeling that somebody's watching us. And we just like, we need to move away from that and focus on, like deconstruct why we think that and where it came from. And by deconstructing these things, we can better understand why we have these feelings and why we're feeling these pressures. And then, so in the case of this home, we're hoping to do individual narrative therapy with young girls. So they'll have like therapy once a week individually for like 1 to 2 hours. That'll be narrative therapy based, and then and they'll also participate in group narrative therapy. So in the individual narrative therapy, we'll like screen and assess where they're coming from and how ready they are to participate in group therapy. Because in order to participate in narrative group therapy, you need to be in a certain like state of mind, because often girls with depression have like traumatic things that have happened to them, and if they're not ready to discuss that or aren't in the right mind frame to be in discussion with others and dialogue with others, then they would need to like be prepared for that, which is the purpose of psychoeducational group therapy, which is where they'll learn, it'll be with a narrative approach to it, so like they'll learn narrative tools and they'll learn how to interact with each other within, and they'll learn the tools that they need to move into the narrative group therapy. And the cool thing about narrative group therapy is that narrative group therapy, one of the main things in narrative therapy is it's called thickening, and they refer to the outsider witness group. So it's the thickening process makes the building of alternative stories possible, because if I can rewrite my narrative and re-author my life and rewrite a whole new story for myself that I believe outside of the one that's original. But unless I have somebody to hold me accountable, it's really easy for me to fall back into my old story and my old narrative that I used to believe about myself. Therefore, like, so thickening, like inviting others into that story and the new narrative and the re-authoring of your life allows for like the thickening process to take place. So then when I do want to slide back into like my old beliefs about myself, other people can be like, actually, this is why you believe this, and this is why your depression is lying to you, and this is why your alternative story is the best option. And in group therapy, that's possible. It also helps, narrative group therapy has also shown improvements in social skills and social relationships among young people, because it gives them a space, like people who struggle in social situations, it gives them a space to talk with each other and learn the social skills that they need to dialogue and to express themselves properly, and it builds social relationships in the group, and then building those social relationships in the group makes them more comfortable to build social relationships outside of the group, which is why I think that that's really important. Another thing that I really love about narrative therapy is that it's really important to remember that although you're separating the problem from yourself, it doesn't take away the responsibility that you have to that problem. So like narrative therapy is one of the focuses is to remind you that you have a responsibility of how you interact with your problem, and whether you let it control your life or you like so in the case of somebody, my favorite story about narrative therapy is the stinky poo story. This is more common relief. And it's in a book that David Epstein and Michael White wrote together, and they discussed this story. So it was this young boy who was 6 years old, and he had a problem with pooping everywhere. And so his parents didn't know what to do, so they went to a therapist because they tried so many different things and nothing was working. So they went to the therapist, and he was like, okay, we're going to try narrative therapy. And they tried externalizing it, and he named it stinky poo, because one of the things is naming your problem and giving it a personifying it. And so he named it stinky poo. So now it was a battle against stinky poo, and the therapist joined him in this battle against stinky poo to be like, we can conquer stinky poo, like, don't let him control your life. And so so eventually he was like, oh, stinky poo got me this week, but it was only once this week rather than 3 times a day. And eventually he was able to overcome stinky poo. And and in that, it was like now he had a responsibility of how he interacted with stinky poo. He could let it control his life and continue to like disrupt everybody else's lives around him, or he could consciously make the decision to be like, I'm not going to allow stinky poo to control my life anymore. In this, it's also important to discuss like the therapist's role. The therapist needs to, in this approach, the therapist needs to be aware of like their power over, like, because it's easy to slip into a power role in that situation, but narrative therapy is all about walking with somebody through something, not about being in power. So the therapist needs to be aware of the social constructs that they're a part of, and like constantly be reminding themselves of that and making sure that they're not making the decisions for the person or telling them what they need to do, rather than just guiding them using certain questions and helping them reauthor. Like it's not up to the therapist to reauthor their lives. It's up to the client to re-narrate their lives. I think that's all that I'm going to say, and I'll just open it up for discussion.
So as part of your project, you designed like a retreat in which you would bring teenage girls into this, like into group narrative therapy?
Yeah. Emily's going to talk more about that, so I don't want to get into it too much, but what the idea is that it'll be a summer home so that they won't be disrupted, it won't take them out of their normal everyday lives. Okay. But instead they can come and get away from the society that they're a part of, and get away from like their high schools and their families for a minute, and just like have time to reflect on themselves and really work on themselves to be able to learn better coping mechanisms. Any other questions?
So Steph, would you say that normative gaze, that concept is the stinky poo for many young girls today? Like that's the thing that they have to battle against?
Yeah, I would say that. A lot of them. Sorry. Yeah, I would, because it's all too easy, especially in high school, when you already are developing your identity very much because you're developing it based on who you hang out with. So you don't really know yourself at all, but then especially teenage girls, like they're in this confusion of not knowing where they are, what they want, and then they have to like live up to these pressures of society. So I think that it's really important, especially at a young age, to teach young girls that you don't need to live up to these standards. Like you need to live up to what you want for yourself and set those standards. And that's a huge thing, I think, in today's world, today's society. And I think that I would say that is the stinky poo in this situation.
Trying out my new words.
Steph, in your research, did you compare narrative therapy with other forms of therapy and how effective those forms might be?
I only focused on cognitive behavioral therapy because it's like one of the most used forms of therapy for depression, or is the most used form. And I found quite a few I found a few case studies that compared the two of them, and it was interesting because neither one of them came out on top. Both were just as effective as the other. And CBT is like, there's a lot more practice with it, and for me, I believe that there's just not enough narrative therapy out there to prove, and like it's a longer term therapy. It's not like based on sessions. Like it's not a planned therapy that we're gonna do it in this many weeks and stuff like that. So like I think if we have more longitudinal studies, there would be more evidence to suggest that narrative therapy would potentially be better than CBT. But I did compare it to cognitive behavioral therapy, and the studies that I found said that it was just as effective as CBT, and that people that use narrative therapy had like gained interpersonal skills that they didn't have before.
I have a question for him. So with this particular type of therapy, is it, like with you having said that it's kind of like a longitudinal thing, how would that affect the girls when they're done this summer program? Like, is that something that they can go through themselves, or would they have to like eventually bring family into it, kind of also including their society again? Or do they, are they gonna have to seek therapists outside of this?
They might have to seek therapists outside of it, depending on how bad their depression is, but I don't think that it would be necessary. And also, like, one thing that I didn't mention in my project, but that I've been thinking about a lot, and I've talked to other people about, is that bringing the parents into it and like doing a workshop maybe with the parents and introducing these types of things, because like having the parents be a part of that thickening process of being like, this is their alternative story, this is what they're trying to live for, and like holding them accountable. But it also helps the parents to be like, oh, so my child's not actually a problem child, they're suffering because of this thing. So then it helps the parents also, which I think would help them when they left. But I think that while they're there, they'll learn enough tools that they would be able to get, hopefully, the hope is that they would learn enough tools that they would be able to get by after they were done, and then they could come back or stay in contact. I mean, would do follow-ups and stuff like that, but I don't think that they would need to necessarily, but I think that it's always beneficial to have somebody. Yeah.
Sort of building on Erica's question a little bit, I guess. I like this idea of sort of having a safe space where people can like sort of learn to interact with other people, and then sort of carry those tools out in the real world. I guess I'm wondering if, like in your plan, there's sort of specific strategies that like will kind of be developed, or if it's more just kind of a safe space where people can learn how to develop friendships in kind of like an organic way, and then sort of carry that out into the world or whatever. Or if there's like, sort of more explicit kind of strategies.
So correct. I think Emily's going to touch on that more.
Okay.
Maybe. But so we're hoping that also we'll plan group activities and like get them out in the communities and volunteering and stuff like that. So we'll get them involved in things that they are interested in being involved in, and do workshops on figuring out like what you're passionate about and what you want to learn about, and then encourage that type of behavior, as well as like we got a lot of inspiration from SSU, because SSU has been so helpful for both of us in the community here. So we also would do like community cleaning, community meals, and we would like do that type of thing together. So and we would do like outings, like hiking, or like we would like get them out. Or in narrative therapy, you can use narrative therapy with like art therapy and other types of therapy can be weaved in with it. So and I think that the group therapy will help them with the interpersonal skills of being vulnerable with each other, and then in that, hopefully bringing them closer together. So. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.